All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Russo, and I am the CEO of Palm Beach Tech, bringing you the South Florida Tech Podcast, a weekly show where we bring you the awesome, innovative people building our South Florida tech community. Each week, we'll introduce you to one of the Sunshine State's top tech leaders, learn more about who they are, what they do, and have some fun conversation along the way. Our podcast is, of course, presented by Palm Beach Tech, a nonprofit dedicated to building South Florida into a tech hub. I'm your host, Joe, and also joined by my co-host, another Joe.
Yeah, guys, great to be here. Super excited. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Wyncode Academy, and I'm really looking forward to today's chat.
And we want to, of course, thank our sponsors for the podcast, Emerge Americas. Each year, global enterprises, disruptive technology, and elite startups are highlighted at this premier tech event connecting the Americas. The event is held in Miami Beach and to date has hosted organizations from over 40 countries and featured 250 plus speakers from around the world. They're helping build South Florida into a tech hub, and we want to thank them specifically. You guys do a lot of great work. Looking forward to the next Emerge. Hopefully we can do that in 2021. We are very honored to be welcomed by Brian Brackeen today. He is, I was joking a moment ago, a general baller, but he is actually general partner at Lightship Capital, founder of an investment fund focusing on startups founded by underrepresented professionals. He's responsible for fund operations, entrepreneurial training, and leadership of the AI team. But outside of Lightship Capital, Brian engages as an entrepreneur and investor through companies such as Fresh Fry, Undock, and Excited Inc. Before investing in companies, he worked as a senior project manager at Apple. He founded Kairos, an artificial intelligence company specializing in facial recognition, and he has become one of the more prominent folks in the South Florida tech community and part of the Miami startup scene. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. You guys are good with you got the whole thing set up. You got the good voices. I need to work on my Zoom voice.
The podcast.
Well, I've been working on a number of voices over the years, but I've never thought of myself as a radio host. I thought I always had a good voice for it, but then all of a sudden you start a podcast during COVID-19 and the whole world is different.
I've always had a face for radio, so I understand that.
Oh,
yeah.
So Brian, other than having a face for radio, what is it that you do? What is life in Brian like? Tell us about who you are and tell us about what you do with work.
Sure. So who am I? I'm a person that loves travel, loves people, loves community. One of the reasons I like what you guys are doing is I'm a big believer in South Florida and its promise to be not to be, but it is already one of the great tech hubs in the country and in the world. So just making sure that we kind of tell our story a little larger. And then how do I take those learnings that I've learned from the Miami experience and then use those across different other regions in the US, like the Midwest, the South? How do I help other cities like Cincinnati or Detroit or St. Louis or Tulsa, Oklahoma to follow the successful path that Miami has in creating its robust tech ecosystem?
That's awesome. So I don't even know where to start, Brian. I warned you guys before we went live that I feel like we could have like at least a 2-hour conversation here. I met Brian back in 2014, back when I was very hopeful of being selected as an Endeavor entrepreneur. Brian was already selected as an Endeavor entrepreneur and a leader in the ecosystem. And he just took personal time to meet with me and my co-founder, Yuha, to coach us in how to approach the international panel where we did end up getting selected. So thank you for that and always supporting us in all the things we're doing. So I feel like, your passion for fellow founders and helping entrepreneurs is pretty long-standing. Since the moment I met you, this is what you've been doing. So it's awesome that you have your fund and you're doing this now in that way too, which is furthering it in other regions. I was wondering why the focus on startups, why founders, and in particular underrepresented? I have an idea of this, but obviously there are, some great challenges there. There's some great opportunities. So why did you decide to focus on this path, underrepresented founders in particular?
Well, the first thing, it's nice to get paid for all the efforts that I was doing for free before. So it's a wonderful improvement on that. Plus, you can give more time, right? I do 20 of these calls or 20 kind of support calls or more in a week. But back then, I could only probably do 2 or 3, right? So I love the scale that you can have by having a fun. But yeah, why this group? Why entrepreneurs in general? I'm a big believer in the power of entrepreneurship to transform communities, even countries. And one of the things we believe as Endeavor folks, right, is that if you really support the best companies and the best people, you can literally impact GDP. Endeavor, for those that may not know, is an international organization in 35 locations of countries, really, around the world, markets. They support over 1,000 entrepreneurs who we consider high impact. So one, building great businesses, but also 2, kind of great people. We really want to support great people so they can build great things. And those Endeavor entrepreneurs create about $24 billion worth of revenue every single year. And I joined the board of Endeavor Midwest earlier this year. So trying to kind of continue to give back to these communities. And then the why we're underrepresented. Same answers. There's a huge impact though. So only less than 3% of all venture capital goes to a woman. And that's ridiculous considering they're 50% of the people, right? 0.2% of all venture capital goes to a Black woman, right? Insane. And so there's a societal issue there, which I'm trying to solve, but there's also a market failure that I'm trying to exploit to the benefit of our investors. And so again, this work feels like it's right for me.
Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, some of that data that right there that you just shared. One of the things that's listed on your website is that, quote, diversity has evolved to represent more of a business strategy than a solution, end quote. Can you talk about that statement and how it's grown true in recent years?
Yeah, one of our largest investments is in a company called Prove. It's a progesterone ovulation test. And so anybody who's ever tried to get pregnant knows that there's really 2 key hormones: estrogen, that's talked about a whole lot, and progesterone, which is important for both getting pregnant, but also staying pregnant and having a healthy womb and all these things. And so there was not a urine test for progesterone on the market at all. And Joe, I don't know if you ever had any kind of any of these kind of use cases, but Dr. Amy Beckley, the founder of the firm, she had 7 miscarriages, and she was like, you know what? I'm solving this problem myself. I'm a scientist. I'm tired of it. Goes into her basement and creates a shelf-stable progesterone urine test in her basement. Passes her FDA 510K clearance in her basement. Gets it patented in her basement. Sells $200,000 of them on Kickstarter in her basement, and then goes to the JP Morgan Biotech Showcase and says, "Hey, investors, look what I've done. This is a big deal." And remember, about 80 or so investors, not a single one of them got up to talk to her after her presentation, except for my wife.
Wait. So not even talk
to her about it. The only person of the 80 was my wife, Candace. And Candace was one of less than 3, right, women in the room. So these are all mostly male investors. And they didn't see the impact or the value or the niche-ness of fertility, which is insane. Like, fertility is not niche.
It certainly is not. Yeah.
No. And if everybody was ever having trouble, you would pay anything. Like, its margin's not a problem. It's not like so going back really to the core of the question, this is why it's a good business decision to back these founders, because these are problems that aren't being solved or invested in by the male investor class.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, talking about challenges that, underrepresented founders face, maybe just to talk a little bit more about what are those unique challenges that they face, because founders face all sorts of problems, but they are definitely tougher for underrepresented. I mean, hearing the percentages of women and particularly Black women investment, one of the things I've heard is, which is, challenging, is, oh, there's just not enough of them.
I know.
The businesses aren't worth investing in, or they're not far enough along, or there just aren't enough. There aren't women at the table because there's not enough, or whatever it may be. So I've heard that a few times. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts on that? And what other challenges do underrepresented founders face so that we're aware of them so we can start?
Yeah, because Joe, like, you don't exist. You're not a real person. You're not like you don't exist.
Yeah, I looked in the mirror today and I was like, I did not see myself.
Yeah, nobody on this call exists. It's insane. And then I bet each of us know a ton of amazing founders, right, that are like us, right? A ton. What happens is oftentimes in New York and San Francisco, two groups I reel about on my social media, you guys know too.
Oh yeah.
There's a culture in investment that says we only take warm intros. There's no way to apply on our website. There's no way kind of into this thing. You have to know somebody that knows us. And what happens, like, we tend to know people that look or are most like us.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we get this idea, oh, like, nobody's applying. There are no Black women. Like, like, it's because you don't have enough Black women in your network, but you allowed open applications, you wouldn't. And they continue to fight me on this. Even good-minded people, not necessarily race or anything, but just like, they just really believe that they're going to be flooded with applications. But here's the deal, and what they don't understand, and I've had to talk to people one-on-one at dinner about this, they don't realize the emotional impact they're having on these people, in the sense that those of us that are minorities, we know how they used to have country club rules that required you to get warm intros to join the country club. And you had to have certain rules to join a union, or like this same policy has been used to keep minorities out of places throughout American post-Jim Crow history. Mm-hmm. They're not doing it for the same reason, but they don't realize they're using the same tactics. Yeah. How much that hurts.
How do we break that?
Unfortunately, one conversation at a time. I've had a hard time, the blast message doesn't seem to be working. So maybe we can just get folks in a room one at a time.
Yeah, I do agree. Like, it made me think immediately about like a lot of membership-based things, like clubs, organizations. And yeah, it is really tough. Like, you do see a lot of similarity around yourself. That, there's a big entrepreneur organization down here, not Endeavor. But when you go to those meetings, you look around and it's a lot of similar people. It's a lot of white men, even though there's tons of different entrepreneurs down here, but they're not part of that organization. And so they're trying to make a big effort, to target minorities, women, but I agree, you got to go out and find them and encourage them as much as, in addition to having open and not just getting the warm leads, because that organization that I'm part of is also, you have to get referred by someone. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Gotta break that cycle. And also this idea of referrals, it comes from some of these larger cities where there's just so many people that they've kind of created intentional barriers, but the rest of us don't live in those cities. We can't mimic that behavior from New York City or San Francisco because it's corrosive to a Miami where 75% of Miamians were not born in Miami. 50% of Miamians were not born in the United States. And I'm using Miami as a general South Florida pejorative, but yeah, like we don't have time for groups or classes of folks because none of us are all new.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So Brian, there are differences when working with underrepresented founders than those who aren't. And there's perhaps a mindset or work ethic difference here. Can you speak to some of that?
Yeah, underrepresented founders are more likely to not even bother to raise money.
Really?
Yeah, so they'll bootstrap longer, and they'll just make it work on revenue. This impacts growth, unfortunately, but it does allow them to kind of slowly ramp up, hire staff, that kind of thing. They're challenging with this. One, you get copycats after the model is established, and the copycat will just raise a bunch of money from someone else and then just copy what you're doing as a true innovator. And two, you never reach kind of critical mass where you're able to kind of get enough escape velocity where the dangers of closing go away. And now it's only how big is my win going to be, right? And so that's where we try to talk to those founders about why raising money in that scenario makes sense. But also, maybe that's not venture capital. Maybe that's just a debt or loans, or there's a variety of other things. But yeah, we try to get them to think about capital being a way to boost growth.
So just
Go ahead.
a follow-up on that, Brian. I mean, can you speak a little bit to, I mean, you've raised capital before. You've been out there and
Good times.
Yeah, $13 million before it was cool to be black and raising capital. Yeah.
and, I know Joe's going to speak to some funding questions too, I'm sure, but what was that like for you to go out there and to raise some capital yourself? Like $13 million is not a small amount of change.
Whew, that's awesome.
It was a hand-to-hand combat is how it happened. But I would say I pitched the company over 1,000 times, and I had 120 investors. So that means I had 880 no's to that 120 yeses. And so the fact that we raised that much money tells you it's a perfectly investable company. So why would a perfectly investable company have 880 no's, right? Some of those are good reasons, but some of those are biased, right? And so, yeah, you have to kind of literally look someone who's biased in the face and just leave the meeting, put it out of your head, and move on to the next person. You got to be able to do it over and over and over again to be successful.
I think it's really like, man, it's awesome the companies in the fund. Like, I do think it's special to, not only getting funding from someone, but someone who's been a founder, been in the founder shoes, done the fundraising before. So I'm sure that experience share is incredible. I know it was for us big time. I'm wondering what else are you guys focusing on with Lightship for services or mentorship coaching that you're providing founders? What does that look like on your guys' team?
Well, to the first point, because I pitched so many people and I have a very good memory, we play this game where I have the founder on a little card give me the gender, city, right, and age of an investor that they want me to be, and they give it to me, and I spin around the chair 3 times, and I become someone that I pitched. Right?
Role-playing mock trials, that's awesome.
Right, and I'll just give it back to them exactly as they gave it to me. Sometimes they're aloof. Sometimes they're pitching, right? And I'm just like on my phone, not paying attention. Like sometimes they're pitching, and I'm asking them, "Oh, like didn't you just get married? Like, what are you gonna do if you get pregnant?" Like, I'll give them all the, ridiculous situations, and so they can, be jarred by it the first time, but it'll be with me in a safe environment versus being jarred in front of the investor, right? Or at least they know if you hear this, just move on, right? So I think that certainly helps. But then we also offer generally kind of Google Ventures level of service, because that service isn't being offered in the Midwest and the South, right? So we have a director of content who's kind of really like an award-winning writer. We have a director of engineering who we become the CTO or help them find a CTO and hire a CTO in their organizations, or we'll just kind of jump in on fire or whatever. We have folks in partnerships. We have folks in the venture capital space, help them with their term sheets, this and that. I have an investment team. So we have different teams for everything that the company is going to need. And we just make ourselves available. A design team, like we make ourselves available to the companies as need be.
That sounds awesome. Super cool. And obviously, I think the other thing too is like you and Candace have been so thoughtful about what you're providing, which services, just because you've been through it yourself, and it's so easy to see like the things that would have been such a big help. I was wondering, I know you're a huge advocate of Miami and South Florida. What do you think about the minority founder support in South Florida currently? What do you think, what can we do more of, less of? How can we elevate? Because I'm a huge believer. I think diversities are going to be our competitive advantage. I know I'm borrowing that from Matt Hagman, but I really believe it. It's one of the things that attracted me here. So I'm just wondering, can you speak a little bit to like what's happening in South Florida now? Where do we want to work to get to help those awesome founders?
Yeah, I think for everybody in the call, Matt Hagman is like one of their favorite humans, like on the entire planet, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Like hands down, like, and that's a crazy thing to say for all of us to say that, right? It speaks to the character to him as a human. And if he heard this, he would hate even hearing that.
Oh, yeah.
As you know, because he's that kind of guy. But, it's in his era at Knight Foundation, we saw a lot of investments in the minority communities. And one of the things, there's a really cool meme of kind of three kids trying to like look over a fence, and they're different heights, right? And so if you're already tall, you might be able to look over the fence, and if you're shorter, you might need a box or two boxes to stand on so you can see over the fence. And that is kind of like, you know, real equality there. So one of the things that I've talked to Raul and Knight about lately is you're going to have to do different things for these communities just to get them to even. And taking kind of like an all lives matter approach, right? To like, we're going to have something for everybody, but we're starting at different places. Like you're going to have some programs that are specifically for women, right? Like Babson Wind Lab, which I think has been very successful. And programs that are specifically for ethnic minorities, like even the disabled. Like there's no reason that we shouldn't lead the space of like elder folks starting companies in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Like we should be doing seed rounds for folks that are 50 plus, right? Why not us? If not us, who else, right?
I forget what the quote was. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? But I think that probably has a lot of impact. I'm going to look that up after we get off the call. But, you know, speak of Matt Hagman, I was in Kansas City with Matt once at, I believe it was the Kauffman Foundation event that was held there. And it was like, hey, you know, let's chat for a little bit, like while we're here. And he's like, yeah, why don't you like come to this thing with me that Felicia Hatcher is doing, and we can like chat in the way. And I'm like, yeah, totally sure. So I go there, and Felicia had put together a roundtable of underrepresented founders and ecosystem builders in Kansas City. I think Joe's heard me mention this before. And I look around, and I'm in a room of like 2-3 dozen people, and I am the only, you know, stereotypical white guy that is there. And I am sitting in a room of people who are absolutely brilliant, amazing, and like hearing this conversation about how do we get more underrepresented founders to succeed? Like, what do we have to do as like their support system? And how do we, you know, work through the typical and the atypical means to do it? And kudos to Matt for like bringing me into that conversation, right? And I feel like that's the stereotypical Matt. Like, let's like engage these conversations. Let's have them. Let's go outside the norm, and let's try and feel like how we can do better. So kudos to Matt. I'll text him later. We'll mention that we talked about him. But before you know, we dive in, because Joe's got some questions to come up here. One of the things that we noted here, this might be a little weighted, but you don't require to be on the board when you invest. And I think typical, especially of early stage investors, is they want a seat at the table or seat at the board in some way. But you made the decision to not do that. And, you know, maybe dive into that and how it impacts, you know, the companies that you invest in and the founders that you invest in.
Yeah. And oftentimes we're asked to take a board seat. And then we will go on if there's a need. We want to protect our founders from, you know, crazy rogue boards like I've had in the past, right? And how do we like make sure that the founder is always put first? One of the problems in this space is the white male founder is seen as very special, like a Zuckerberg or like an Uber founder or a WeWork founder, right? And Adam Newman. And so it's always about how do we protect that special person and give them all kinds of crazy privileges and rights, independent of even bad behavior, right? And you don't even see that as often with the minority women founders. Actually, you never see women founders, except for maybe like the lady with the blood thing. But then the minority or the Black founder is seen as lucky, not as special, and that you can just bring in any gray-haired person, like, okay, you've done a good job, let's have you go on, we'll bring somebody else in, and that new person always runs it in the ground, like 100% of the time. And so one of the things that we see is that like angel groups will oftentimes, because they're all kind of like from this older school, you know, Pepsi boards or whatever, they'll take a company with like, this happened to me, literally 8, 9, 10 person company, and we have like a 7-person board, like insane. I had a 7-person seated board with 2 observer seats, 9 people, and we had like 11 employees or something like that. I mean, it was absolutely insanity. So one of the reasons we don't take a board seat is to try to not see that happen. But if a board is set, we are willing to join it. I'm actually looking at sharing a board now for one of our soon to become investments so that we can keep that board small and focused and not distracting the entrepreneur.
I love hearing that. That's so awesome. I feel like board participation and reporting can be such a time on drag and a distraction from like doing the growth and the building and the day to day. So I totally agree with that. I think there are a bunch of different boards. There's founder first boards, which are rare. It sounds like you guys are really working hard to achieve that. And then there are boards who want to like have oversight on what's going on with their money. And usually they're driven by like their intentions and motivations in those board meetings when they're so focused on profitability and what's going on with the money and when is their turn coming. It always just derails like what the best decision is. And well, not always, most of the time.
Every time.
Every time, yeah. And it's really tough. And I feel like once those investors have a seat, oh man, they're glued to that seat. It's really hard to like change the dynamic. So that's so awesome to hear that. And I was wondering, so I'm sure there's people listening in right now who are like, I want to be part of that fund. Yes, heck yeah, that sounds great. So I'm wondering, what do you and Candace look for, right? What are you looking for? How is a founder going to get your guys' attention to invest in them? Yeah.
So the first thing, as mentioned earlier, anyone can apply for investment. Please do. We welcome it. There are no warm intros, hashtag no warm intros. So you just go to lightship.capital and there's literally a link at the top of our page that says apply for investment. Like literally, like it's literally that simple. And then we kept it to like a short number of questions just because we don't need every single thing that some of these platforms ask for just to say the first yes or no. Like record a video of yourself, put in a deck, what city are you in? You know, like very, very straightforward stuff. And we can tell if we should get on the phone or not. Like that's it. We see about 2,000 applications per investment a year. So it's a lot of need kind of, you know, in these areas, but we want even more. And also, we respond to every single application. Every single person gets a yes or a no, because we want you to feel like this is for you. Like some VC funds, they don't allow open investment. And then when you do get to them, they don't even respond. Like it's insane. So we're trying to treat people with respect and like humans. That's the top. And then we have a kind of criteria. You have to be in the Midwest or the South, geographically. You have to be in a demographic group. And that's women of any color, ethnic minority, LGBTQIA+, or the disabled, right? So it's a pretty wide swath. And for the record, people might say like, oh, well, how are you going to get in the best deals if you're not investing in older white guys? Like, well, actually, Fred, if you were to look at the CEO of Apple, Facebook, Apple, Google, IBM, like Microsoft, they would all be in thesis. All those CEOs would be in thesis, right? Yeah. So like, there's no drop off in the quality of leader just because you're looking at just this group, right? And then we only invest in 5 industries because we want to really focus our attention on certain areas that we do well in the Midwest and the South. And that's consumer packaged goods, so CPG. That's artificial intelligence. I have a background there, obviously, but also e-commerce, sustainability, and healthcare. You know, South Florida, great healthcare environment, as you would imagine. And then a lot of our investors are also in those spaces. So Procter & Gamble's an investor, or Kroger's is an investor of ours. Delta Dental is an insurance healthcare space is an investor of ours. So we look at that as well.
Love it. That's awesome. So you heard it here, Lightship Capital. That's what you all need to do. Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, so we are actually at time. So Joe, I would love for you to get the rapid fire questions.
Yes, let's do it. Okay, so rapid fire, Brian.
Here we go.
This is gonna be a tough one. In case you guys didn't know, Brian splits his time between these 2 cities. If you had to pick one, Miami or Cincinnati, what would it be?
Ooh, on the hot seat. On the hot seat. I love Cincinnati's architecture, culture. The food's great. It's different than Miami's food. People. There are over 1,000 Black businesses in Cincinnati that are over $1 million in revenue. Like we have to get there as a city in Miami. But I like the weather too, and I like the people, and Miami kind of made the person sitting here in front of you today. So I would say Miami 1, Cincinnati 1A.
I love it. Miami
Rapid. We got to go rapid fire on these. Rapid fire.
Eagles or the Heat?
All day.
All right. That answers that. What? He's an avid fan. Book on your nightstand right now.
Nothing, just nothing. And I go audiobook. Good.
Most productive time of day.
Ooh, first thing in the morning, 7 to 10 a.m.
Time you go to bed.
10.
Time you wake up.
7.
Favorite podcast.
This one.
I love it. Is there a motto, mantra that you live by that inspires you, that guides you? And what is it?
Wow. I would just say in life, just start, do it well, but you got to start. Don't plan too much, just do it.
Love it.
Love it. And dude, love you, man. You're awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us, and taking some time out of your day. Again, if anybody who's listening wants to learn more about Palm Beach Tech, you can go to palmbeachtech.org. Shout out to Wyncode, Joe and her team. If you want to jumpstart your technology career with premier accelerated training, web development, UI, UX, digital marketing, go to Wyncode Academy at wyncode.co and you can apply there. And thanks to you guys. Thanks to Brian. Thank you for Joe for spending some time with me this afternoon. Hope everyone has a good rest of your day.
And follow me at Brian Brackeen on Twitter. See you guys.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. Bye.